Every winter I was carrying 3 snowboards, a bunch of helmets, and holding my kids' hands. So I made this. Today I'm going to walk you through how to make this simple DIY snowboard shoulder strap that makes getting to the hills way easier for you and your kids. Before we jump into cutting and sewing, there's a few things that I want you to think through. These choices will affect how you measure the straps and how these straps will work for your family in the long term. How many boards are you going to carry? Do you have 1 board, 2 boards, 3, or 5? That's going to make a big difference. How do you want to carry the boards? Are you going to carry them over your shoulder? Are you going to do a crossbody like a messenger bag style? Are your kids going to carry them, or are you going to carry them? What kind of bindings do you have? Not all bindings are the same. Some have heel supports, some don't. I'll show you the options for both. And finally, how big are your kids right now? We want to future-proof these straps so that your kids can grow into them and so that you're not making new straps every year or two. And before we get started, I just want to go over some general measuring rules. When we're measuring anything in this project, we want to measure loosely because we have to remember that once this project is done, most of the time we're going to have gloves on and we're going to be in the snow. So we want to have extra webbing to work with so that it's not a tight squeeze. Whenever we're measuring for our bindings, we want to make sure that we're adding 4 inches onto the final measurement of our bindings. And we always want to make sure that we're counting for 2 bindings in our final calculations, not just 1, because we only measure 1 binding. I want to quickly review with you how to measure the different parts of your snowboard when we're making these straps. If you're using one snowboard that has a back binding here for your boot, what you're going to do is just grabbing your tape measure, you're going to wrap around here very loosely. So I've got it really loose. And the reason I'm saying loose is because this is going to make it easier to buckle later. So right now I've got, right now I'm going to use about 7 inches on this one. So that would be the measurement for just the buckle itself or the binding itself. On top of that, I will need to add an additional 4 inches for my trigger grip as well as for my loops. So it's going to be 7 inches plus 4 inches for just a single board. If you or your child have bindings that don't have a back heel, all you're going to do is sort of measure this location here on your binding. And I find that this is the best spot simply because it's got a portion that is completely solid and it won't let the straps fall off. So all we're going to do again is just grab our measuring tape and go around. Now with this one, I like to leave it even looser than my other ones because we have to get in between all of this stuff here. If you measure from the other side, and if you plan on putting it in from the other side, you will have more space because the bindings portions aren't kind of in the way here. And so all we're doing is we're going to again measure this, and for this one I'm going to go 9 inches just because it's got more space. And it'll allow me to have to deal with any issues that I've got on this side if I do it. When we're measuring the distance for the strap that's going to go over our arms, I recommend you do 2 lengths of when we're measuring the length of the strap that's going to be used to go over your shoulder to actually carry this board, I recommend you use 2 lengths of the bindings. Now when we have bindings that don't have a back heel here, we're going to be attaching it to the outer portion of the binding here. So I recommend that you measure from outside to outside. And so we're just going to be measuring 2 lengths here. So that's going to be 38 inches for me for this board. So now I'm just going to walk you through an example of how to measure the full binding for just this one board without the back heel portion of the binding. So we're going to measure outside edge here, and that's going to be 9 inches, and that's leaving an additional, that's leaving slack in the webbing so that I can easily attach this later. And we're going to add 4 inches on top of that. So it's going to be 13 inches for each binding. And then we counted 38 inches because that was the distance from the outer edge on both of the bindings times 2. So it's 38 inches. So we have 26 plus 38 is 64 inches in total for this webbing that we're going to need. And so all I want to do is grab some webbing and I'm going to measure it. Now when you're doing this, if you're finding that maybe this seems like it's way too much, you can always do a sanity check on yourself. All right, so once I've got my webbing through the bindings here, I'm just gonna pull my arm through this webbing to see how much extra I have. And I've got enough to go over my shoulder and have the board still stay on the table without pulling it through the bindings. This is giving me a good indication that I've got enough webbing here for this. Now, I could use my kids to measure this, but they're gonna grow in time and need bigger straps anyways, but realistically, I'm gonna be the one that's carrying these boards, so I might as well make it sized to me. Now, if my kids get bigger, these board bindings will move, so it'll get tighter and higher on me, but that's okay too. I prefer to make this once a little bit too big and grow into it than make it 5 times over the years. Finally, I wanted to talk to you about carrying 2 boards at once with this setup. When I was initially designing this, I was planning on having the straps go between the 2 bindings, between the heel supports on the bindings, but if you actually hold the boards by the bindings in this fashion, the boards are going to come out this way and you'll end up scratching the bottom of your board with the edge of the board, so you don't really want to do that. So what I recommend is if you want to make a strap to carry 2 boards at once, just grab your tape measure and measure around the width of the 2 boards together and give yourself a few extra inches of space. So for mine, I've got about 28 inches, and that would give me a surplus of webbing along the outside of the boards. Now on top of that, I would probably add maybe 2 inches to give me space for all the sewing that I'm going to need with the hook and the loop. But when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you don't want the metal of the hook and the loop hitting the side of the board, especially your edges, because then your board won't be sharp anymore. It'll make snowboarding more difficult. And then when you're measuring the length of the strap for this setup, I would recommend doing 1.5 times the length of the distance of the largest setup between the bindings. So this one would be about 21 inches. I'd go 1.5 at most, because you're going to have some extra slack from the straps that are holding the boards together, and you don't want to have this down to your ankles. Okay, so now that we've figured out how to measure this, let's talk about the supplies that we need. We're gonna need some webbing. So I've told you hopefully how to measure the webbing that you need. I need 2 hooks. Now I'm using these trigger hooks because I find that they're easy to use with gloves on, but you can use just regular ones that like you pull down and it like opens up here. Or you can even use carabiners. I don't like to use carabiners because we lose them all the time and they fall off. I want something that's secure. The one thing I want to point out, my hooks here have a rounded edge, and this works with the 1-inch webbing, just like so. But if you're buying new hooks, I recommend the ones that have a flat base, and I've left a link to those kinds in the description of the video. And then we need some loops. I'm using some half loops because then I can like simply put these through like this, and I have a nice spot to grab with my hook, just like that. So those are the supplies that we need to make this. And I've left a link to all the products that I'm using in the description of the video, but I've also left a link to hooks that have a flat edge instead of a rounded edge like I have. Don't forget, when you're working with webbing, over time it's going to fray, so before you do any of your sewing, you want to make sure that you burn this all so that the plastic doesn't fray anymore, so it doesn't come apart. And now you'll have a webbing that doesn't loosen itself over time, because the last thing you want to do is have some sort of a technical error there. If this project already feels helpful, go ahead and hit the like button. It helps support my channel. Okay, so let's put this together now. The first thing that I want to point out to you is that you want to make sure that you put these half loops on before you start to put your hooks on, because once these hooks are on, you're not going to be able to get these hoops on. And all we're going to do is first start off with 1 hook, and we're going to pull our webbing through, and we are going to pull it about 1 inch through. This is why we need the extra inches on our binding measurement, so that we have space to sew here. Now, I'm not sure how good you are at sewing, But you need to leave yourself space here so that this metal hook is not close to the foot of your sewing machine, because this is going to cause chaos. So you want to pull this through about an inch and a half so that you've got space to sew here. Now when you're sewing, I recommend you try to do like a square with a cross through it, or go up and down a bunch of times and just move it kind of back and forth. That way it's going to hold. You don't want to just do one line of sewing here, because over time, with the amount of wear and tear that this is going to get from pulling, that can come loose. Okay, so I've got my trigger hook sewn into place now, and it's holding on tight. I made like a square and an X in it. My sewing skills aren't always the best, and it's a little bit tricky to work with this rounded edge. That's why I recommend using one with a square edge. So the next thing that you want to do is you want to go back to your notes where you've written down how much space you need for the binding itself. So for this binding, I needed 16 inches. So I'm going to go at 16 inches from this point here. And if you haven't put these loops on yet, be sure to do this first before you go on to the next step. So we're gonna go 16 inches, and then we want to add another 2 inches on top of that so that we can have kind of the space where our loop is gonna be. Now, this is the point where we're going to flip this over, and we're going to sew in this spot here now. So this is why we got the extra fabric, or the extra webbing. And again, we're going to try to do a square and some overlap stitching so that this stays put when we are using this later. We don't want this loop to be loose and flying around. So now I'm going to quickly sew this loop on. Okay, and now I've got my first loop sewn into place, and it is ready to work with my first hook, just like that. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we have this loop here waiting for us for later. We're actually going to go back to the other side and do this hook first, because we need to make sure that we have the hooks on to measure outwards. So we're going to repeat the same process. I'm going to sew this piece on, and I'm going to try to do it in about an inch and a half of space. I'm going to measure 16 inches out, add 2 inches, and in the middle of that I'm going to fold it. So technically I should add 1 inch and fold it over with my loop in here so that it's ready to go. And then I've got my pieces finished. So I'm going to quickly sew this side, measure my 16 plus 1 inches, fold it, and sew this piece down, and we'll be right back. Okay, so now we've got the straps done. So all I do is we loop this through, we snip it onto the hook, and we do the other side as well. And you can go from the inside or the outside, doesn't make a difference. Loop this on, and we're ready to carry this. So I'll get you a better shot of this being held as well. And now that's the completed snowboard carrying straps. And there you have it. We've successfully made our DIY snowboard shoulder straps that makes getting to the hills easier for you and your kids. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit the like button so that you can help my channel grow. But before we go, there's a few final tips and lessons that I wanted to talk to you about. If you're unsure about measuring, be sure to do a sanity check. I walked through how to do one during the video, but you can always just use yarn or string or anything that you'd like to measure this out to give it a test run against your body or your kids' bodies. If you want to plan ahead for these straps, you can always make the straps to fit you and your snowboard, and your kids will grow into it. That'll allow your kids to carry the strap with their snowboard as a crossbody or a messenger bag style for the first few years as they grow into it. I chose the trigger hooks because I find that they work the best in the snow when you have mittens or gloves on, but you can use regular snap hooks or you can use carabiners, whichever one is your preferred method. I just found that these worked best for me. I've made snowboard straps in the past, and I've left the link to the video for those up here as well. I found that those ones also worked really well. They work better for skis, I think, but I found that I didn't plan ahead on making those long enough so that when my kids grew, their snowboards grew, there wasn't enough slack in them to use it on bigger snowboards. So I've had to redo them. So this is my second design on these ones. So hopefully this one is better. If you've made these straps, let me know how many boards you're carrying. Are you carrying 1, 2, 3, multiple boards, multiple straps? Let me know in the comments below. I'm always curious to know how that works out for everybody. If you've enjoyed this project, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this with your friends. Thanks so much for watching, and happy crafting.